Hey guys, what is up, and I welcome each and every one of you to a new League of Legends video. So today we'll be going over the biggest changes coming over to patch 8.5, which should be hitting the live servers in just a couple of days. So as usual, if you guys end up enjoying this video, then please don't forget to hit that like button, but let's not waste any more time and get right into patch 8.5. So one of the first and also one of the biggest changes coming out to the next patch is of course going to be the release of the new champion, Kai'Sa. Now I have made already some gameplay videos playing this champion mid lane, bot lane with different builds, so if you haven't checked them out, I highly recommend doing so. But I'll give you guys a quick rundown of the champion and my thoughts on her. Kai'Sa is mainly an AD carry, however she can in theory be played mid lane, jungle, and top lane as well. She's made by the same person that designed Camille, and her kit is extremely focused on a hybrid-esque sort of build because her passive, her Q, her W, and also her ultimate all have AP and AD ratios. The best way of thinking her is imagine taking Varus, removing some CC, but adding a lot of mobility, and that's essentially Kai'Sa. Her passive is essentially a 5-hit passive that once you proc it does a ridiculous amount of damage. Her Q ability fires some missiles to nearby targets that prioritizes trying to hit every single target with every single missile. Her W is essentially Jin's W that procs her passive as well. Her E ability is a dash that also can go invisible later, and her ultimate lets her teleport to a target that currently has a passive mark on them. Now in terms of builds, I feel like the best way to build her is definitely going for a hybrid type of build, which is why I said she's very similar to Varus, because Guinsoo's Blade on her is a must. Also, don't build Blade of the Rune King. It's a recommended item on her according to Riot, but trust me, it is very, very bad. She's very fun, very agile to play, feels very strong, scales quite well as well, and can do a lot of really cool outplays because of the nature of her ultimate, where she'll be diving into the backline when people least expect it. All in all, I definitely think she's actually quite strong. I feel like she's not the hardest champion to pick up as well, so I feel like she shouldn't have too much of a low win rate in the first patch, since all new champions always have a low win rate first patch because the champion of course is new and people are getting used to them. But all in all, a very strong and very effective champion. But let's move on to the buffs and nerfs, and the first champion we'll be talking about is unfortunately Azir. Azir is getting his Q ability even further nerfed because prior to this patch, Azir's Q did get a massive cooldown increase at the earlier ranks of it, but now it'll just do less damage overall, especially as you rank it up. Only 10 less damage rank 1, but a total of 30 less damage by rank 5. Now Azir obviously isn't in the best spot at the very moment, and I feel like this will definitely hit him quite hard, so I might actually finally put him down and not play him anymore. I know a lot of people have been telling me to stop playing him because my win rate is pretty bad, but this will definitely make me want to play other champions instead. Moving along, we also have a nerf coming over to Galio, but in my opinion, nowhere near enough as to how much he needs to be nerfed, because my goodness is he overpowered. The nerf is going to be towards his Q ability, where not only the cooldown has been increased, but the cost has also been increased. Now for the cooldown, it won't really affect you too much until you start ranking up the ability to where rank 5, it's a 2-second increase in cooldown, but at least on the bright side, the increase in mana on his Q ability has been changed from 90 rank 5 to now being 130, 40 extra mana, which is definitely a little bit of a nerf. I mean, that's a lot of mana for a rank 5 ability of Q. But is it enough to really just nerf Galio down to the ground, or at least put him in a quote-unquote balanced state? I don't think it is. Next, we have some massive changes coming over to Jhin. Now, Jhin is personally one of my favorite AD carries in League of Legends and one of my favorite champions overall, and this guy has really not seen the light of day for so damn long. He is just simply outclassed by too many other ADCs. Hopefully this buff will put him back at the top, and the buff is as follows. His passive, Whisper. The passive AD has been increased from starting at 2 up to 40% based on level to now starting at 4% going up to 44% based on level. Since this is percent increase, obviously this means a lot more than it currently sounds like, but at the end of the day, it's still not a completely massive buff to his passive. But luckily for us, his other abilities are also receiving some buffs as well. Because next up we have his Q ability, Dancing Grenade. The AD ratio has been increased from starting at 40% to now going up to 70% rather than before going up to only 60. And last but not least, his W, Deadly Flourish. The W now roots off of all damage Jhin deals, not just his basic attacks. So you can maybe just throw in a Q and instantly follow up with a W, or maybe land your ultimate, it'll put the passive marker on them, and then you can maybe land a W for a really long range kind of snipe for the root. It just gives him a lot more options to actually use his W, because his W is extremely effective, and honestly it's one of the main reasons you even want Jhin on your team, because of his massive long range pick potential and also CC potential. All in all, honestly, some pretty damn good buffs for Jhin. I feel like his win rate and play rate will without question go up after this. The question still stands though, by how much? Moving along, we also have a buff coming over to Nocturne, also a champion that has not seen the light of day for way too long. So starting off with his passive, basic attacking against champions will now reduce the cooldown on his passive by 2 seconds per auto attack rather than 1, which obviously is pretty damn strong because his passive does do quite a bit of damage. The healing on his passive has also been significantly increased because now it starts at 15 rather than only 10 before, and now it goes all the way up to 40 rather than only 26. So a pretty big buff to Nocturne's passive overall, which will not only help with his jungle clear since he'll now get more HP back whenever he procs the passive, but it'll also help his dueling potential since now he'll get his passive up that much more frequently when fighting champions. But it doesn't stop there just yet, because moving on to his ultimate's Paranoia, the enemy vision reduction duration has been increased from 4 seconds up to 6 seconds. So using this within a team fight, just completely reducing the vision of all the enemies for an extra 2 seconds is a lot, because every single half a second even counts in a team fight, and it really is important. So some pretty juicy buffs for Nocturne, but I mean, I don't know if this is going to be enough only because of the meta of the current jungle. I mean, ganking is heavily rewarded, and Nocturne isn't a very strong early game champion. He's a jungler that likes to power farm the hell out of his jungle. So I don't know if the meta fits him just yet, but the buffs are definitely quite welcomed. Moving along to Mr. Olaf, we have some more buffs coming over to this bad boy as well. Starting with his E ulti Reckless Swing, the AD ratio has been increased by 10% and the cooldown has also been lowered. And his ultimate also got changed with how it works, because now instead of giving him quite a bit of bonus flat AD whenever he procs it, instead it'll give him only a little bit of bonus flat AD, but it'll also scale with 30% of his total AD as well. So a little bit weaker overall in the ultimate, but as you start getting items and get a lot more damage, it will scale really hard. However, this also means that you'll have to build much more offensively on Olaf to make this really work properly. But keep in mind, it is scaling off of 30% of total attack damage, not a bonus, so you don't really need that much more actual AD, so it really shouldn't be too bad, and it should be overall a buff for sure. Moving along, we also have a buff coming over to Rengar, because apparently the rework didn't actually put him in the spot that he probably wanted to be. The buffs are as follows. The lockout time before Rengar can cast in-power spells has been reduced by just a bit. Unseen Predator, his passive, the fall-off timer has been increased by 2 seconds for the ferocity, which is extremely good. His Q ability's damage has been increased by the base damage and also had the way it scales, though it's not completely significant. And his ultimate's True Vision now lingers until the end of his leap. Now, not the biggest buffs of course to Rengar, but it is a scary champion that is extremely volatile, so you gotta be careful with the way you buff him. He's also received a bunch of bug fixes that you can see in the right of the screen here that I'm not gonna go over, but if you're curious what they are, then you can read them on the right. Then we have a nerf coming over to Ryze, and God bless for this, because I hate facing Ryzes whenever I play in solo queue because I always ban him. Spellflux, his E ability, the damage has been increased, however, Spellflux now only deals 50% damage upon spreading. So if you actually use this ability on the champion himself, then it's going to do quite a bit more damage. However, if you actually use it to try and proc the kind of AoE portion of it, it'll do a lot less. And following with this, his ultimate Realm Warp, the cooldown has been increased from 120 seconds all the way up to 180 seconds, a full extra minute, which is pretty damn big. Definitely going to be expecting to see a lot less Ryzes from now on. Next, we have a very quick buff to Shyvana, where the AD per level has been increased from 2.8 to 3.4. Now, this obviously doesn't seem like a lot, but I honestly think it's more than it looks, because that is quite an increase in actual AD gain per level, and I feel like Shyvana, just with this alone, actually may find a little bit more success. Next up, we have a nerf coming over to Skarner, where the stun duration on his E ability has been decreased by ever so slightly. Not the biggest nerf, and I feel like Skarner will still be quite strong. We also have a buff coming over to Swain, where the Death's Hand, his Q ability's cooldown has been lowered, and the W radius has also been increased. You max out his Q ability first anyways, then by the time you get it to rank 5, it'll be the exact same as it currently is on the live service, so I mean, not the biggest buff in the world. However, the increase in radius on his W, I think, is actually quite damn good, and I think this is going to be quite a big buff. Next up, we also have some changes coming over to Tristana, which overall should be a nerf, because her default attack range has just flat out been lowered, but her passive now gives her more attack range as you rank up. Now, by rank 18, it actually pretty much puts you at the exact same spot as you would be currently on the live server. So overall, they're just nerfing her early game to make her kind of weaker rather than just being kind of strong throughout the whole game. Because at the very moment, honestly, Tristana doesn't really have any weaknesses. But to try and sort of compensate, the W's damage has been slightly increased. Moving along, we have a quick buff coming over to Twitch, and more specifically his E ability, where the base damage has been increased as you rank it up, starting at 20, going up to 60 rather than starting at 20, going up to 40 on the live servers. And don't forget, that's 20 extra damage at rank 5 per stack, so that thing adds up quite fast. And as someone that also loves playing Twitch, again, Jhin and Twitch being my two main AD carries, this is a very welcome buff. Next, we also have some changes coming over to Zoe. Her attack range has actually been increased by 25, kind of the opposite of what they did to Tristana. But then they changed the way her Q ability works overall. The TLDR is the fact that it no longer synergizes with her passive whatsoever, but it now actually increases in damage based on Zoe's level. But the AoE has been lowered to 80% for those not directly hit with the Q ability. So with that being said, you can see the base damage has not only been increased, but the AP ratio has been increased by 40%, on top of the increase in damage based on Zoe's level and the reduction in AoE damage. And of course, her passive not working with the Q anymore. But moving along, her W also received a slight buff where the bubble acquisition range has been increased by 25 and the damage on her W has also been increased by a decent amount. So it seems like this is going to be a change to where late game I think Zoe will actually be stronger than she currently is. But in the earlier parts of the game, she should be overall weaker. Now, very quickly, I wanted to mention a rework coming over to Locket of the Iron Solari. Now, keep in mind, this is actually not coming to the next patch, but I thought I'd mention it very quickly because now it has a new effect that essentially puts a big AoE dome around you after casting it that just decreases the damage you and all your allies take within that zone, which I think is actually super cool, but we'll see it in the next patch, not the one coming up in a couple of days. And also a new keystone called Conqueror, which is pretty damn disgusting. Just adds a whole bunch of extra damage and true damage as well, but it's also not coming next patch, but it'll come the next patch most likely. So just want to bring it up. There's also voice chat that's on the PBE, which actually finally does work, but it's only with your pre-made team, which should be coming the next patch as well, so not the one in a couple of days, which I thought I'll bring up just in case people were wondering what the update was on the whole voice chat stuff. And some quick keystone changes where Fleet Footwork now is less effective when a ranged champion is proccing it on minions. Press the attack is actually getting an even further buff, so it's going to be a lot more tempting than taking a Fleet Footwork. And Aftershock's cooldown is being increased by 15 seconds, and God bless that because this keystone is overpowered. And last but definitely not least, we have a buff coming over to the Cloud Dragon, which personally I think will make it extremely damn good. So now instead of giving you 25, 50, 75 out of combat movement speed, instead now it gives you 2, 4, or 6% movement speed, but it's tripled when you're out of combat. Now you get movement speed in combat and even out of combat, and it's all percent as well. So if you go for a movement speed type of build, you're gonna be just zooming across the map. So Talon seems to be quite good because he gets the rune that gives him extra movement speed. He builds a lot of movement speed. I feel like I can probably start playing some Talon in the next patch. But either way, guys, that is it for this video. There you have it, a bunch of new changes coming over to the next patch, patch 8.5, in just a couple of days. If you enjoyed this video, then definitely remember to hit that like button to show your support. But thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you for the next video. Peace.